What happens when Hollywood royalty meets journalistic integrity head-on? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Gayle King on CBS Mornings, expecting another softball interview, only to face the most explosive confrontation of her media career. The Duchess of Sussex thought she could control the narrative one more time, but she had no idea what was waiting for her in Studio 57. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouse women clash in ways no one saw coming. Last night's episode of CBS Mornings started like any other celebrity appearance. The cameras rolled, the lighting was perfect, and Meghan Markle walked onto the set with her signature confident stride. Wearing an impeccably tailored cream blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, she flashed that practiced smile we've all seen countless times, the one that says she's in complete control of the situation. But within minutes, that smile would be replaced by something far more telling. Gayle King, veteran journalist and no stranger to high-profile interviews, welcomed her guest with professional warmth. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I know our viewers are excited to hear from you." The studio audience applauded politely, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Everyone could sense this wasn't going to be just another promotional appearance. Meghan settled into her chair with practiced grace, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. "Thank you for having me, Gayle. I'm always happy to speak with you." Her tone was measured, controlled, but those who knew her well might have detected the slightest edge beneath the politeness. This was a woman who had grown accustomed to sympathetic interviews, to journalists who treated her with kid gloves. The first few questions were standard fare, updates on her various projects, her life in California, the usual celebrity talking points. Meghan answered with her typical blend of relatability and privilege, speaking about her journey and her truth with the kind of rehearsed authenticity that had become her trademark. But Gayle King isn't just any interviewer. She's a journalist who built her reputation on asking the questions others won't ask. And she was just getting started. "I want to talk about something that's been making headlines recently," Gayle said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "There have been some concerning reports about your behavior on various film and television sets. Former colleagues have come forward with allegations about a pattern of difficult behavior, demands that some are calling unreasonable, and what multiple sources describe as a hostile work environment." The change in Meghan's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. Her carefully constructed smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place, but it was too late. The cameras had caught that microsecond of genuine reaction, the flash of anger that she usually kept so well hidden. Her publicist, sitting just off camera, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think there's been a lot of misinformation spread about me over the years, Gayle," Meghan replied, her voice still controlled, but with a noticeable chill. "People love to tear down successful women, especially women of color who dare to have standards and expectations in their professional lives." But Gayle wasn't backing down. If anything, Meghan's deflection seemed to energize her. "These aren't anonymous sources or tabloid speculation, Meghan. We're talking about named individuals, directors, producers, crew members, people with established careers who have nothing to gain by coming forward. One director specifically mentioned that you demanded script changes minutes before filming, refused to work with certain cast members, and created what he called an atmosphere of fear on set." The studio fell silent. This wasn't the friendly chat Meghan had clearly expected. The audience members exchanged glances, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the camera operators seemed more alert, knowing they might be capturing television history. Meghan's hands tightened almost imperceptibly in her lap. "I find it interesting that these so-called allegations surface just as I'm launching new projects and speaking out about important social issues. It's a very familiar pattern, isn't it? Successful women who refuse to be silenced suddenly face a barrage of criticism about their difficult behavior. But let's be specific about one incident." Gayle pressed on, clearly prepared for this deflection. "During the filming of your recent Netflix project, 3 separate crew members reported that you screamed at a junior assistant for bringing you the wrong coffee order, then demanded that person be fired on the spot. When the director intervened, witnesses say you threatened to walk off the production entirely unless your demands were met. How do you respond to those very specific allegations? The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's practiced composure was beginning to crack in earnest now. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time since sitting down, she uncrossed her legs and leaned forward slightly. A subtle but unmistakable shift into defensive mode. Gayle, I'm disappointed that you would choose to ambush me with unverified gossip instead of focusing on the meaningful work I'm trying to do, Meghan said, her voice taking on an edge of condescension that would have been familiar to anyone who had worked closely with her. I came here in good faith to discuss my charitable endeavors and my advocacy work, not to defend myself against workplace rumors that have been deliberately twisted by people with their own agendas. The word ambush hung in the air like a challenge. Gayle King had been accused of many things throughout her career, but unprofessional journalism wasn't one of them. Her expression remained neutral, but seasoned viewers could see the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested this interview was about to take an even more dramatic turn. This isn't an ambush, Meghan. This is journalism, Gayle replied with deadly calm. When public figures face serious allegations about their professional conduct, especially when those allegations involve the mistreatment of working-class employees, that becomes a legitimate news story. And I have to ask, if these reports are false, why haven't you or your representatives issued any formal denials? Why hasn't there been any legal action against these supposed lies? The question hit its target with surgical precision. Meghan's media training had prepared her for many scenarios, but not for this level of persistent, fact-based questioning from someone she had clearly expected to remain in her corner. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable seconds as she searched for a response that would regain control of the narrative. But Gayle wasn't finished. With the skill of a seasoned prosecutor, she continued her line of questioning. And there's something else I think our viewers deserve to know about. Multiple sources have told us that you've been using your royal title and your connection to the British royal family to secure meetings and opportunities, while simultaneously criticizing that same institution in public. Isn't that a contradiction? That was the moment everything changed. The careful mask of composed celebrity completely slipped away, replaced by something raw and authentic. Authentic anger, authentic indignation, and perhaps most tellingly, authentic entitlement. Meghan's eyes flashed with unmistakable fury, and when she spoke, her voice carried a tone that anyone who had ever worked in service industries would recognize immediately. "Excuse me?" Meghan's voice cut through the studio air like a blade. "How dare you sit there and question my integrity? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" The transformation was startling. Gone was the carefully modulated tone of the polished public speaker, replaced by something sharp and imperious that seemed to come from a much deeper place. Gayle remained perfectly still, her journalist's instincts telling her that this was the moment she had been probing for. "I'm talking to someone who has made very public claims about transparency and authenticity, while privately operating in ways that seem to contradict those values," she replied evenly. "And I think our viewers deserve to understand that contradiction." "Your viewers?" Meghan let out a laugh that contained no humor whatsoever. "Let me tell you something about your viewers, Gayle. They wouldn't last 5 minutes in my world. They have no idea what it's like to carry the weight of expectations I carry, to deal with the level of scrutiny and pressure that comes with my position. Every single day, I have people depending on me, looking to me for leadership, for inspiration. And you want to reduce that to gossip about coffee orders?" The studio audience was completely silent now, but not the comfortable silence of rapt attention. This was the silence of people witnessing something they weren't sure they should be seeing. Several audience members had their phones out, clearly recording what was becoming an unprecedented moment in daytime television history. Gayle leaned forward slightly, her voice remaining calm and professional even as the situation escalated. "But that's exactly my point, Meghan. If you're in a position of leadership and influence, doesn't that make your treatment of others even more important? These aren't just employees we're talking about. They're human beings trying to do their jobs. Don't lecture me about treating people well," Meghan snapped, her composure now completely abandoned. "I have spent my entire adult life fighting for the underprivileged, for women, for people of color. I have used my platform to shine light on inequality and injustice. And you want to sit there and act like I'm some kind of monster Because I have professional standards? Professional standards or personal demands? Gayle countered without missing a beat. Because, according to the reports we've received, asking a junior assistant to drive 40 minutes to get you a specific smoothie that wasn't available on set isn't about professional standards. Having someone fired because they looked at you the wrong way isn't about maintaining quality. Making crew members work 16-hour days to accommodate your schedule changes isn't about excellence, it's about power. The words hit Meghan like physical blows. Her face flushed red, and for a moment, she seemed to struggle with whether to respond or simply walk away. When she finally spoke, her voice had taken on a dangerous quiet that was somehow more unsettling than her earlier outburst. You know what, Gayle? I'm starting to understand what this really island. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job. Someone got to you, didn't they? Someone decided that Meghan Markle was getting too comfortable, too confident, too successful, and they needed to take me down a peg. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied Gayle's face. Tell me, how much are they paying you for this? Or is it just the ratings boost you're after? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. To suggest that Gayle King, a journalist with decades of credibility and integrity, had been bought or was acting out of malice, was not just insulting, it was professionally devastating. The camera caught the subtle tightening of Gayle's jaw, the first real crack in her professional composure. I'm going to pretend you didn't just question my journalistic integrity, Gayle said, her voice still controlled but with an underlying steel that hadn't been there before. Because I think you're upset and you're not thinking clearly. But let me be very clear about something. Nobody pays me to ask hard questions. Nobody has to. It's my job. Your job? Meghan's voice rose again, and she gestured dramatically with her hands. Your job is supposed to be informing the public, not tearing down women who are actually trying to make a difference in the world. Do you know what I could be doing right now instead of sitting here defending myself against ridiculous allegations? I could be working on initiatives that actually help people. I could be meeting with world leaders about climate change, about women's rights, about global inequality. And yet, here you are, Gayle observed quietly, talking to me about coffee orders and demanding that people be fired. If these allegations are so ridiculous, why haven't you simply denied them? Why haven't your representatives issued statements? Why has every response been an attack on the credibility of the people making these claims? The question was like a master chess move, and everyone in the studio could sense that Meghan was being backed into a corner. Her media training had prepared her to deflect, to redirect, to charm her way out of difficult moments. But it had never prepared her for this level of sustained, methodical questioning from someone who clearly had no intention of letting her off the hook. Because I shouldn't have to, Meghan said, her voice now tinged with desperation that she was trying to disguise as indignation. I shouldn't have to defend my character to you or to anyone else. My work speaks for itself. My commitment to social justice speaks for itself. The fact that you're more interested in workplace gossip than in the meaningful contributions I'm making to society tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. But that's where you're wrong, Gayle replied, and now there was something almost gentle in her tone, which somehow made her words even more devastating. Your work doesn't speak for itself when it's contradicted by how you treat the people who work for you. Your commitment to social justice doesn't speak for itself when you're accused of creating hostile work environments for the very people you claim to champion. And your meaningful contributions don't speak for themselves when they're overshadowed by reports of behavior that contradicts everything you say you stand for. The studio fell into complete silence as the weight of Gayle's words settled over everyone present. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore, it was a reckoning. Meghan sat frozen for several long seconds, her face cycling through emotions as she processed what had just been said to her. When she finally responded, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a venom that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. You have no idea what you've just done, Meghan said, her words dripping with malice. You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? Some crusading journalist speaking truth to power? But you're nothing but a puppet dancing for ratings, tearing down someone who has actually accomplished something with their life. She paused, her eyes scanning the studio audience with obvious disdain. And all of you, sitting there with your phones out, recording this like it's some kind of entertainment. You're pathetic. The insult to the audience was a bridge too far. These weren't anonymous internet trolls or paparazzi. These were regular people who had taken time out of their day to attend a television taping, and Meghan had just called them pathetic to their faces. A few audience members audibly gasped, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Gayle's expression hardened. She had remained professional throughout the entire interview, even as Meghan had questioned her integrity and accused her of corruption. But attacking the audience crossed a line that no responsible journalist could ignore. "Meghan, I think you need to take a breath and consider what you're saying." "Don't tell me what I need to do," Meghan exploded, her voice echoing through the studio. "I don't need advice from you or anyone else in this room. Do you know who I am? Do you understand what I've sacrificed to get where I am today? I gave up everything, my career, my country, my family, to stand up for what's right. And this is how I'm repaid? By sitting here while some television host treats me like a common criminal?" "You're being treated like someone who needs to answer questions about their behavior," Gayle replied firmly, "just like anyone else in the public eye who faces serious allegations about how they treat other people." "Other people?" Meghan's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Let me tell you about other people, Gayle. Other people don't have millions of eyes on them every single day. Other people don't have to worry about every word they say being twisted and analyzed and turned against them. Other people don't carry the responsibility that I carry for representing an entire movement, for being a voice for the voiceless." She stood up abruptly from her chair, the sudden movement causing the camera operators to scramble to keep her in frame. The studio lights caught the fury in her eyes as she looked down at Gayle, who remained seated, calm, and in control. "You want to know about those crew members who complained about me?" Meghan continued, her voice growing louder with each word. "They were incompetent. They were unprofessional. They couldn't handle working with someone who actually has standards, who expects excellence, who refuses to accept mediocrity. So they went running to the press with their sob stories about being held accountable for their work." "Accountability and abuse are two different things," Gayle said quietly, but her words cut through Meghan's rant like a knife through butter. "And from what I'm seeing right now, I'm starting to understand why so many people have come forward with similar stories about working with you." The observation hit its mark with devastating accuracy. Meghan's entire body seemed to tense as she realized that her behavior during this interview was actually proving Gayle's point. She was demonstrating exactly the kind of entitled, dismissive, and hostile attitude that had been described by multiple sources. "How dare you?" Meghan whispered, but the words lacked the power of her earlier outbursts. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed to understand that she was losing control of the narrative in a way that couldn't be recovered. "I dare because it's true," Gayle responded with unwavering calm. "What we're seeing right now, the way you're speaking to me, to our audience, the way you're dismissing legitimate concerns about your behavior, this is exactly what people have been trying to tell the public about their experiences working with you." Meghan's face flushed red as the full impact of what had just happened began to sink in. She had walked into this interview expecting the kind of sympathetic treatment she had grown accustomed to receiving from other media outlets. Instead, she had been systematically exposed, her carefully crafted public persona stripped away to reveal something far less flattering underneath. "This interview is over," she announced, but her voice cracked slightly on the words. "I will not sit here and be ambushed by someone who clearly has an agenda against me." "The only agenda here is the truth," Gayle replied. "And the truth is that multiple people have come forward with consistent reports about behavior that contradicts everything you claim to represent. That's not an agenda. That's a story that needed to be told." Meghan began fumbling with her microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to remove it. "You haven't heard the last of this, Gayle. My legal team will be reviewing every word of this broadcast. You've made a serious mistake today." "The only mistake," Gayle said, rising from her own chair with dignified grace, "would be failing to ask these questions when the evidence is this overwhelming and the pattern is this clear." Meghan ripped the microphone from her lapel with such force that the wire caught on her blazer, nearly tearing the fabric. She threw the microphone down on her chair with a violence that made several crew members step back instinctively. The sound of the equipment hitting the chair echoed through the now completely silent studio. "You people have no idea what real problems look like," she hissed, grabbing her purse from beside her chair. "You sit here in your comfortable little studio, playing gotcha with people who are actually trying to change the world, while real injustices go ignored. This is exactly why nothing ever gets better. Because instead of focusing on what matters, you waste time on petty gossip and workplace drama. She turned toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply against the studio floor with each angry step. But just before she reached the edge of the set, she turned back one final time, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "I hope you're proud of yourself, Gayle," she called out, her voice echoing through the studio. "I hope destroying someone who has dedicated their life to helping others was worth whatever ratings boost you think this will give you. But remember this, I will continue fighting for justice and equality long after people have forgotten your name." With that final, desperate attempt to reclaim the moral high ground, Meghan Markle stormed off the CBS morning set, leaving behind a studio full of stunned audience members, shell-shocked crew, and one veteran journalist who had just witnessed something unprecedented in her decades-long career. Gayle King remained standing beside her chair for several long moments, watching the space where Meghan had disappeared. When she finally turned back to address the camera, her expression was one of professional composure, mixed with obvious concern about what had just transpired. "We'll be right back after this break," she said to the camera, her voice steady despite everything that had just happened. As the cameras stopped rolling and the studio erupted into nervous chatter, it was clear that everyone present had just witnessed television history in the making, and not the kind that anyone would be proud to have participated in.